Imagine waking up every morning to the sound of a screaming engine ripping through your backyard. Not once, not twice, every single day it starts at dawn, the roar of an ATV echoing like a chainsaw through the neighborhood. She comes barreling through the yard I pay taxes on, the grass I mow, the fence I built, and when I try to stop her, she looks me dead in the eye and tells me I'm the one trespassing. Her name? Karen, of course, the self-declared sheriff of the HOA. The queen of laminated rules, unsolicited complaints, and weaponized newsletters. But here's the kicker. I'm not even in the HOA. And yet, somehow she decided my land was her shortcut, her racetrack, her personal playground. You'd think calling her out would fix it, that a conversation, an ounce of logic, might make her stop. But this isn't a story about logic. It's a story about entitlement, about what happens when someone decides the rules don't apply to them but should apply to everyone else. What started as a few torn-up tire tracks in my lawn quickly spiraled into false HOA reports, police visits, public meltdowns, and a legal battle that ended with someone tearing down their own fence. And trust me, in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to take you inside this unbelievable ride, how Karen tried to use HOA bylaws like a weapon, how I used her own rules against her, and how one man with a camera, a deed, and a little patience brought down the HOA tyrant no one else dared to challenge. This isn't just a petty neighbor dispute, this is a full-on HOA war. And it all started with a pink ATV and the wrong kind of confidence. So grab a drink, settle in, because this isn't just a revenge story, it's a masterclass in karma. Let's begin. It started like clockwork. Every morning, just as the sky began to shift from charcoal to pale blue, the silence shattered. The shrill, obnoxious roar of a neon-pink ATV ripped across my backyard like a missile with handlebars. The birds stopped chirping. My coffee turned bitter in my hands, and at the center of it all, Karen. Helmet too big for her head, sunglasses that belonged on a beach, not behind an and that smug expression, like this whole block was just her personal kingdom. The first time it happened, I thought it was a mistake, a wrong turn, maybe a shortcut gone too far. But when she made eye contact, raised her chin, and waved me off like I was the problem, I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. By the third morning, she'd carved tire tracks so deep into my lawn it looked like a dirt trail. My dog refused to go outside. When I tried to confront her, she didn't even slow down. "This is an HOA-maintained path," she shouted over the engine. "I have every right to be here." But I don't live in the HOA. I never signed those rules. This was my land, purchased fair and square, deed in hand. Still, Karen rode like she owned the soil under her tires. And worse, she thought I was powerless to stop her. A little lesson: some people don't just cross the line, they pretend the line never existed in the first place. That was the moment I stopped hoping she'd stop, because if Karen thought she could ride through my life without consequence, then it was time I showed her what happens when you push a peaceful man too far. Next. When entitlement meets property lines and loses. The thing about people like Karen is, they don't knock. Not on your door, not on your fence, not on the limits of logic. They just barrel through, assuming they belong wherever they choose to be. That morning, I finally stepped out onto my porch and waved her down. She slowed her ATV just enough to shout over the engine. "This is an HOA-maintained trail," she said, with the smug certainty of someone reciting scripture. I blinked. "I'm not even in the HOA." She shrugged. "Doesn't matter. All paths in this community fall under HOA jurisdiction." That's not how property works, that's not how boundaries work, and it's definitely not how law works. But Karen didn't care. To her, my lawn wasn't a yard, it was a shortcut. My fence wasn't a line, it was a suggestion. The entitlement was staggering, and when I pointed to my clearly marked lot line and told her, calmly, that she was trespassing, she actually laughed. "You're just mad because you don't have an ATV," she said, revving the engine and tearing off like she'd just won an argument. What do you do when someone lives in a world where rules only apply when they benefit? When they hold up HOA guidelines like a weapon, but completely ignore deeds, state laws, and basic human decency? You document, you prepare, and you wait. Because people like Karen, They always take it one step too far. A little lesson? Entitlement makes people believe that your silence equals consent until the silence ends, and that moment came sooner than I expected. Next, the day the ATV sank in my yard, and Karen finally had to face gravity. It had rained the night before. Not a soft drizzle, a proper storm, the kind that turns soil into soup and makes your shoes disappear if you stand too long. The ground was still wet when I heard the familiar roar, Karen, in all her pink-helmeted glory, flying down the sidewalk like a discount Evel Knievel, and then, like clockwork, she turned right onto my lawn. I didn't even move, I just leaned on the porch railing, coffee in hand, and waited. She hit the patch of waterlogged earth, and the ATV sank, not dramatically, no flips or fireworks, just a slow, agonizing squelch as the rear wheels buried themselves in 6 inches of thick, stubborn mud. For the first time ever, Karen stopped moving. She revved the engine, twisted the throttle, flailed her arms like a toddler denied candy. When she saw me watching, she pointed directly at me. "This is your fault," she screeched. I raised an eyebrow. "How exactly? You should have put up a sign." I nearly choked on my coffee. "A sign? That says what? Please don't drive your illegal ATV through my private yard?" Her face flushed crimson. She stomped her foot like the ground would listen. "And then, brace yourself," she demanded. I helped push her ATV out. When I refused, she pulled out her phone, muttering about reporting me to the HOA. I just smiled. "Go ahead, they don't own my land." She stormed off, leaving her ATV like a wounded animal stuck in the mud. Hours later, she returned with her husband. The poor man looked like he'd fought one long, losing battle called marriage. No words, no eye contact. He just helped her yank the beast free while she barked complaints at the sky. A little lesson? Entitlement is bold until it meets resistance and bad weather. That was the moment I knew Karen wouldn't stop. So it was time I stopped waiting. Next, HOA politics and the man named Chad, where the real game began. After the mud incident, I figured it was time to take this higher. Surely, if the HOA knew Karen was trespassing, daily, noisily, aggressively, they'd do something about it, right? So I walked into their office. Small building, beige walls, a table with too many papers and too little action. 3 board members sat inside, flipping through folders like they were auditioning for a scene called "We're Very Busy." I explained everything. The ATV, the tire tracks, the harassment, the property line. They exchanged glances, nervous ones, the kind you make when someone tells you the truth and you wish they hadn't. One of them, Chad, a guy in a golf shirt with HOA fatigue written all over his face, cleared his throat. "Yeah, we can't really do much about her." I blinked. "She's trespassing?" Another member, a woman who looked like she'd aged 5 years just this week, sighed. "She does this to everyone. We've warned her. She doesn't listen." So that was it? They just let her run wild? I walked out, more frustrated than when I'd walked in. But then Chad followed me. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "If you want her to stop, you can't just complain. You have to beat her at her own game." I narrowed my eyes. "Meaning?" "She only respects one thing: power. You show her she's not untouchable, she'll break her own rules trying to retaliate." I didn't know whether to thank him or be deeply concerned. But that night, as I listened to the distant rev of her engine echo through the trees, I realized something. If Karen used the rules as a weapon, maybe it was time I did, too. A little lesson? Sometimes the people in charge aren't ignoring the problem, they're just too tired to fight it, and I was just getting started. Next, she said I was trespassing on my own land. The next morning, I didn't wait on the porch. This time I followed her. If Karen truly believed that my private yard was an HOA-maintained trail, then surely I had every right to walk on it too, right? So I grabbed my phone, started recording, and stepped into her self-proclaimed domain. She spotted me almost immediately. Her helmeted head snapped around, oversized sunglasses flashing with disbelief. For a moment she looked like a deer caught in its own headlights, and then she hit the brakes. The ATV skidded to a stop, wheels slicing the grass like a knife. "You're trespassing!" she screamed, pointing at me like I was holding a torch and pitchfork. I stopped, blinked. What now?" "This is private property," she shrieked. I looked down at my feet. "You mean my private property?" She crossed her arms, nostrils flaring. "It's an HOA pathway and you're harassing me." "Oh, so now it's private?" I asked calmly, because 5 minutes ago it was community space. Her face flushed red, deep, undeniable red, and right on cue she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the cops." I didn't panic. Didn't raise my voice. I just kept filming. 10 minutes later, 2 officers showed up. Karen greeted them like she was auditioning for Victim of the Year. "He chased me," she wailed. "He followed me through the woods." The older officer turned to me. "Sir, is this your property?" I nodded, holding up the deed on my phone. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Well, not technically, but the HOA says," the younger officer cut her off. "Ma'am, HOA rules don't override property ownership. A little lesson? When entitlement runs out of excuses, it usually starts calling 911. But Karen wasn't finished. Next, the petition, the propaganda, and the public meltdown. You'd think after the cops clarified the property lines, Karen would back off. You'd be wrong. Because Karen didn't believe in retreat. She believed in escalation. A few days later, I got a text from Chad, the reluctant HOA board member. It was a link to a neighborhood forum I didn't even know existed. At the top was a post titled, "We deserve to feel safe. Remove problem homeowners now." The author, Karen. The post? A full-blown manifesto accusing me of harassment, stalking, unauthorized surveillance, and get this? Toxic masculinity with a drone. She'd attached blurry screenshots, random legal jargon, and even a petition. Apparently, she was calling for the HOA to force me to sell and vacate the neighborhood for the safety of all residents. How many signatures? 0. Not even her husband. Still, the audacity was impressive. And the meltdown? Well, that came live at the next HOA meeting. Chad texted again, "You might want to attend this one." So I did. Karen stood front and center, dramatically waving the unsigned petition like it was the Declaration of Independence. "This neighborhood has standards," she declared, "and we must remove those who threaten them." She turned to me, fire in her eyes. "You've been stalking me." I crossed my arms. "On my own land?" she stammered. "It's the principle." Another neighbor mumbled, "The principle of driving through someone's lawn." Karen ignored the room's silence and kept ranting. But silence speaks volumes. When Chad took the petition from her hands and flipped through it, he raised an eyebrow. "Karen, this has 0 signatures." Her face paled. "That's because people are scared," she snapped. Of a man barbecuing on his own deck, someone whispered, and half the room chuckled. A little lesson? When you try to turn truth into fiction, don't be surprised when no one wants to read your story. And that night, something changed. The neighborhood wasn't laughing with her anymore. They were laughing at her. Next, the rules she broke while quoting the rules. After the HOA meeting fiasco, Karen disappeared for a few days. No ATV, no passive-aggressive flyers, no unsolicited HOA reminders taped to doors, but I knew better. Silence from Karen didn't mean surrender. It meant strategy. So I got ahead of her. If she wanted to weaponize the HOA, fine. I was going to read the rulebook too, cover to cover. And guess what? Turns out the self-proclaimed enforcer of neighborhood standards was violating half of them. For starters, her beloved garden gnomes, technically against the HOA's uniform landscaping guideline. Her backyard shed, built 2 feet over the allowed property line. But the best part? Her prized pink ATV, never registered. According to HOA regulations, all recreational vehicles needed to be disclosed, approved, and logged with the board. Karen's wasn't. And that violation came with fines. Big ones. So I filed a formal complaint. Clean, precise, fully documented. Within the week, Karen received a beautiful little envelope from the HOA. Inside, a violation notice, a fine for the unregistered vehicle, a warning about the illegal shed extension, and a note that her garden gnomes failed community conformity standards. I watched from my porch as she stormed into her yard, ripped the gnomes from the soil like she was unearthing traitors, and shouted something incoherent at a squirrel. She caught me watching and hissed, "Enjoying this?" I grinned. "Actually, yeah, a little." She stomped back inside. A little lesson? If you build your castle out of rules, don't be surprised when someone uses them as a wrecking ball. For the first time in weeks, my lawn stayed untouched. But Karen? She wasn't done breaking things. Next, the zoning complaint that backfired spectacularly. Just when I thought Karen had burned through every last petty tactic, she went for the nuclear option. A knock came at my door one morning. City zoning official, clipboard, polite smile hiding clear exhaustion. Mr. Patterson, we received a complaint stating your property may be encroaching on HOA-maintained land. I almost laughed. Let me guess. Karen. He didn't confirm. He didn't need to. Instead, he pulled out the complaint form. It was vague, but the tone practically screamed. This was written by someone drinking a Chardonnay at 10 a.m. I handed him my deed. Lot boundaries, satellite measurements. He reviewed them carefully, nodding. Your property's fine, he said. Actually, better than fine. You're right where you're supposed to be. But then, flipping to the next page of his notes, he frowned. Funny thing, though, he muttered. Looks like her property, he pointed across the street. Her fence and shed are encroaching 2 feet onto public land. I stared at him. Karen? He nodded. Karen. It took everything in me not to break out laughing. The same woman who'd screamed trespasser for weeks was illegally occupying city land the whole time. 2 days later, she got the notice. 2 options: move the shed and fence back, or face escalating fines for violation and non-compliance. She, of course, argued, tried to explain why the law didn't apply to her. It went about as well as you'd expect. A little lesson? If you swing the sword of bureaucracy, be sure it's not pointed at your own backyard. The day they came to move the fence, Karen stood in her driveway, red-faced, barking orders at the poor workers like a queen losing her crown. I sipped my coffee, pure serenity. Next, the final straw, the for sale sign, and a Karen twist you won't see coming. When the city crews arrived to tear down the fence, Karen was already outside, arms crossed, rage boiling under her pastel tracksuit. She barked orders like she was directing a SWAT team, not a zoning correction crew. But the workers? They'd seen her kind before. They just measured, marked, and got to work. Methodical, calm, professional. Meanwhile, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, basking in the karmic symphony of hammers and muttered curse words. Her husband helped move the shed, silent as ever, like a man who'd accepted his role in this drama as the background character who occasionally holds things. And then came the envelope, a second one. This time, the city issued additional fines for delayed compliance, thousands in total. Zoning penalties, administrative fees, and the cherry on top, a citation for creating a nuisance through repeated false complaints. It was like watching a house of cards collapse, slowly, dramatically, and on fire. Karen didn't take it well. She screamed at the HOA board, slammed doors loud enough to wake up squirrels, tore down the last remaining garden gnome with a fury that would have made Greek tragedies jealous. The neighborhood? It celebrated. Quietly, of course. Even Chad, the reluctant HOA board member, gave me a wink at the mailbox and said, "Feels a little quieter around here, doesn't it?" I just nodded. Because in that moment, the war was over. The ATV hadn't been seen in weeks, the yard was intact, the HOA was no longer her personal army, and then, one afternoon, a sign went up on her lawn. For sale. A little lesson: you can only push a community so far before it pushes back. With paperwork. Karen was leaving, but as I'd learned soon enough, some endings come with one last twist. Next, the for sale sign, and the new neighbor named Karen. The for sale sign stood like a surrender flag. Within a few weeks, the pink ATV disappeared. The gnomes were long gone, and the once fearsome HOA queen packed up in silence. There was no farewell, no drama, just a moving truck, a few awkward waves from her husband, and the hollow echo of a door that would never slam again. The neighborhood felt lighter. Chad hosted a barbecue, not officially a celebration, but the timing was very convenient. People smiled more, dogs barked less, kids actually played in front yards again. Even the air felt less combative. And then, just when I thought the saga was over, a new car pulled into Karen's old driveway. Out stepped a woman, Fresh haircut, yoga pants, confident stride. She saw me watching and smiled. "Hi, just moved in, name's Karen." I exhaled, slowly. Maybe, just maybe. This one came without the HOA starter pack. That evening I stood on my porch, watching the sunset drip gold across a now peaceful lawn. No tire tracks, no sirens, no shouting. Just the faint hiss of sprinklers and the scent of fresh-cut grass, and I realized something. This whole thing wasn't about fences or fines, it was about boundaries, the kind you defend not just with rules but with resolve. A little lesson? Sometimes the loudest power doesn't come from engines. It comes from choosing to stand your ground, even when no one else does. Karen may have left, but the lesson stayed, and if the next one ever forgets where the property line ends, I've still got the cameras.